we thought we would take the opportunity to really just tackle the 24. And you're the first, to be honest, to be talking to us about both the 23 budget adjustment and the 24 budget request. So welcome, Commissioner, and if you want to introduce, I see you have some staff with you, so.
Yes.
And I don't know, maybe we've got a couple of new members of the committee so why don't we go around and just introduce ourselves for you and for your staff. Okay, Bobby, sure. Yeah.
All staff from Orange County. Well,
Jenny Lyons from Chittenden Southeast.
Rich Wesley.
Jane Kitchell from Danville, from Caledonia. I'm from Danville too.
Dick Sears, Bennington County.
Andrew Persley, Washington District.
And Phil Ruth from Chittenden Central.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Craig Bolio, Tax Commissioner. I do have a number of folks with me today. So Andrew Stein, our COO, I will switch a part of the presentation through, and he'll get into a lot of the meat and potatoes of the operating budget. Also have Sharon Acey, our Finance Director, Holly Anderson with AOA Financial Services, and also Will Anderson with the Department of Finance and Management. All of these folks
To monitor your testimony?
Say that again?
To monitor your.
Yeah, that's right. He's making sure he's keeping me in line.
Yeah, following the script, right?
Yeah, all of these folks are really instrumental to putting our budget together. So they have my thanks absolutely for putting together what we're going to present to you today. So I'll start, Madam Chair, with I think the quick stuff, which were the 3 BAA lines. The first, the homeowner rebate, which I have as about 2.59 million out of an appropriation of 18.6. So that is the municipal reimbursement for the property tax credit program for folks who are under $47,000 in household income.
Oh, that's circuit breaker.
That's right. It's the circuit breaker stuff. And so basically what it means is that we overestimated, and that tracks in years that we have more than we forecasted in personal income tax, right? Generally, we would be thinking about incomes being higher than predicted. So that's what we think is going on here. Incomes were higher than predicted, meaning we issued fewer credits than we had anticipated. So
if you would have counted the UI, the 600 a week, kind of.
That's part of it. That's part of household income. That's right. So that's what we think is going on with the homeowner rebates. The renter credit program had a 4.37 million out of a $9.5 million appropriation. That was a little bit of a bummer to see. This committee might remember that we reformed that program a few years ago, and one of the reasons for that.
To make it more simple so more people would participate.
That's right, and so we did get more people participating, so that's a win. The challenge is we also thought we would be spending closer to the 9.5 appropriation. Members may remember that it had been dropping year over year for a number of years. What we think is going on there is twofold. One, the income situation that I just talked about that impacts property tax credit, but also there's a substantial amount of federal rental assistance right out in the economy, and that is considered a subsidy for our state program. And so that reduces the amount of payments that somebody might get from the program or even make somebody ineligible.
Is that what you were going to suggest, add?
Oh, no, I was just letting Andrea know that we weren't on that slide yet.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just talking off the cuff, no slides.
No, this is 24. We're still on the BAA.
Yeah. And so, our hope is to see what that program looks like when we don't have the amount of federal rental assistance that's out there, and hopefully we'll see what the impacts of the reforms look like. And if we feel like there are tweaks that need to be made to the program at that point, we would certainly want to come forward with them. But we did get more filers as we hoped. So we hope to continue to see that trend, but also spending more money out of that program in subsequent years.
So once again, an estimate based on actual experience you're coming in.
That's right. And a common thread, Madam Chair, the use reimbursement, that was, I have at 103,000 out of an original $17.8 million appropriation. That is for reimbursement to municipalities for the use value, the current use program, that they get reimbursed share of their municipal taxes. So again, we estimate that, and we overshot to the tune of about 100,000, but that was a relatively small amount.
That's really important because there's still people in our communities that say current use costs towns money. as opposed to recognizing that in fact there is a mechanism to make them whole for the lands that are enrolled. Because obviously that varies tremendously from town to town, the number of acres that are in current use.
That's right.
And I guess that's long, that it's been years and years, but there was a time when, in fact, that wasn't a full payment, but it's been at least 2 decades.
Before my time, Madam Chair, that's changed.
Current use,
No, that municipalities were not made whole. In other words, for the tax rate on the municipal side for an enrolled land. Okay. So thank you on that.
Sure.
So those are your 3 adjustments that you're making,
That's right.
and all to the plus.
That's right.
So you can come back again.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to be helpful in that way.
The DFR commission is also usually helpful.
Yes.
All right, so unless there are questions on the 3 adjustments, which are just truing up actual with, and why they're coming in lower, we'll move on to the 24 budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I always love this testimony because I get to talk a little about the awesome work that the tax department does. I'd like to think that I'm bragging as well, because I think that we do really awesome work and have extremely high service levels. I want to start just talking a little bit about what we do and what we're about before we get into the nuts and bolts of the budget. But I'll start with our mission, right, which is to serve Vermonters by administering our tax laws fairly and efficiently to help taxpayers understand and comply with their state tax obligations. When I really think about that mission as a whole, I like to focus on those first 3 words, right? To serve Vermonters, which I think is something that my department has really embodied, especially over the last several years through the pandemic and beyond. And we have 3 overarching goals, right? The first is that we want to be recognized for service-oriented tax administration, right? A lot of revenue agencies, a lot of state agencies talk about wanting to be service-oriented, but the results are not the same. Right? I once called just the general helpline for revenue agencies, tax agencies around the country. About 25% of them wouldn't take my call. It was the regular taxpayer services helpline, and they just said, "We're sorry, we have too many phone calls. We can't help you right now." I bet if you called my department right now, your wait time would be 0. And if there is a wait time, it's less than 5
Should we do
minutes.
now?
We can try it. I'd be happy to test it out, I'm sure. If you call us on April 15th, you're probably waiting 15 or 20 minutes, but we are there. We are there to help you. Right? And I want to be recognized for that, right? Make sure that filing is as easy as possible. We also aim to reduce the tax gap. This is the difference between what should have been filed and reported and paid and what actually was. The federal government estimates this every few years. This got some press during the Congress's discussion of the Inflation Reduction Act. And the federal government estimates that the net federal tax gap after all of the IRS's compliance activity, it's about 14 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar the federal government thinks it should get, it only gets 86 cents, right? That means at the federal level, we're talking $400 billion in tax gap. It's a
But
staggering
then
number.
wouldn't that translate down to us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're linked.
That's right. And there are, I don't want to speculate about what the size of the Vermont tax gap is, right? We have sales tax and they don't. They have FICA taxes and we don't. But you can just imagine if the percentage were similar, it's a lot of money here too, right? And so we have to make sure that we're both helping people get into the voluntary reporting system. The vast majority of that tax gap is not people actively trying to cheat the system. It's just people who don't know the rules or don't know how to file. There are also people in there who are trying to cheat the system, and we have to engage with them as well and help them get on the right
And
side.
sometimes the rules are not clear. We had that debate as ICE, subject to.
Yes,
Huh?
it is.
So what's the answer?
Yes, ICE is taxable.
Okay.
But it's a great point, Madam
Well,
Chair, right?
because Some
This is
people were
what
thinking
makes
it was
up.
a food product and wasn't taxable.
That's right. And this is what makes up a lot of these kind of elements of the tax gap, right? It's just not understanding what the rules are. So we try to, again, take a
By the way,
service.
I'm not in ICE sales.
I just remember that debate, Madam Chair, so I have that answer ready to go. I don't with every sales tax exemption, but that one I remember. But that's really a baseline function of any revenue agency, right? Engage with those folks who, for whatever reason, are not on the right side of compliance and help them get there. And the third is that I want the tax department to be the best place to work in Vermont state government, right? Taxes are complicated. Taxes can be scary. We have to have a service-oriented approach. That means we have to have a very talented, very engaged
So how are you
workforce.
doing with workforce and vacancies and retention?
So with the exception of one division, we are fully staffed at the department. And so the divisions that are fully staffed include our taxpayer services division, which is, I sort of think of it as like the front door, the front window of the department. If you're calling for help, you're almost certainly calling taxpayer services. And they're also the section that deals with most of the refund processing that we are about to enter into the season
call
for this.
Rebecca.
Rebecca is fantastic. Yeah, she can also be the front window to the department. But yeah, so our taxpayer service division is fully staffed, as well as our finance division, which Sharon oversees, and they're handling all the paper mail that comes in and paper checks and things like that. So I feel like we are ready for tax season. It will be a challenging season in the sense that there were a lot of legislative changes last year that we prepared for, but I think we stand ready to help folks and have some good metrics this year.
Oh, sorry. As far as your first two goals, have you ever looked at to make it easy to reducing the tax gap, sending people there, doing the taxes for them, basically saying, like, here's what we think you are.
So that is, I could talk all day about that question. That's an interesting question. I won't, but so let me give you a couple of really interesting tidbits about what makes up the tax gap and why I think that's such a challenging question. So the IRS estimates that when you're talking about something like a W-2, that 99% of that income shows up on the tax return. 1099, it's like 95, 96%. K1, it drops to 85%, right? But where the biggest part of the tax gap is things that do not have a reporting document. So things like Schedule C, Schedule E, Schedule F. The IRS actually estimated in its most recent study on this that only 45% of that income shows up on a tax return, right? And so what's so fascinating about that is what a revenue agency can do in terms of doing people's taxes for them is all of that stuff that's already showing up, right? I don't have insights into Schedule C, E, F income. So, I mean, it's an interesting question. Some countries have done it, but you're still going to end up with that group of folks having to do some kind of self-reporting and just figuring out how to make sure that they know the rules, that they're willing to engage in the rules can be an interesting.
So it might not reduce the gap, but it might.
It might, yeah. Yeah, a fascinating idea and debate. We'll move to the next slide, if you could please, Andrea, and just talk briefly about our core values, and then I'll turn it over to Andrew. We have 4 core values. We established them in 2021, and we established them because as we were coming out of the emergency management of the pandemic, we realized that we wanted like a shared language, a North Star, so to speak, to ground our decision-making, our metrics and analytics, and just help shape who we wanted to be as a revenue agency moving forward. The first is service, right? And that was the one that was really easily embodied during the pandemic, right? I will give all the credit to my staff that during the emergency management of the pandemic, they put their heads down and said, if there's a way that I can help somebody, point me in the direction and I will do that, right? But academic studies have shown what I think will be intuitive. The US tax system is based on voluntary reporting. If people don't understand their liability, studies have shown that they're less likely to file and they're less likely to file accurately. Those same studies show that if you truly take a service-oriented approach and help people and put out resources and give them systems and be accessible, that it has a meaningful impact on that voluntary compliance rate. And so that's what we're going for. The second is integrity, right? Again, if the bedrock of the US tax system is voluntary reporting, that we're asking people to do the right thing, we've got to be doing the right thing. And if we are doing the right thing, that's going to be sending the proper message both to those who are engaging in the system and not engaging in the system. And that
One of the things that I'm thinking about, and for a long time, the attitude towards taxes is longstanding. And yet, this is how we support the services to the citizens of Vermont. This is how we ensure quality of life. This is how we fund education. This is how we fund protection. And so taxes don't exist without, hopefully, a good reason for why but there's been, and it isn't new. And I've said this before, there was a Sumerian inscription that said you can have your lords, you can have your kings, but the one to fear is the tax man. So in Sumer, which was kind of a long time ago, the attitude toward the tax man was not one of, welcoming. So just inherent in the job that you have, if you don't have staff that are viewed as trying to help as opposed to enforcement or, a heavy-handed compliance, although ultimately that might be necessary. You're already starting out with kind of a difficult kind of relationship with people, just historically. So how they receive the kind of support, the clarity of the answers, et cetera, can make a big difference in terms of how people feel. Particularly if it's not through any malicious intent on their own. People are fearful.
That's right. Yeah, you totally hit the nail on the head and why we take the approach that we take, Madam Chair. I mean, Oliver Wendell Holmes said it's the price of civilization, right? That's what we pay, the taxes. So as tax commissioner, you can understand that I love taxes. I recognize that not everybody loves taxes, but what you described is absolutely why. What's that?
I'm gonna bring you my tax.
Hey, we will take it. We appreciate that. But no, that is exactly why we take the approach that we take, right? That there is a segment of the population that we have to engage with because they won't engage in the voluntary system on their own. That is the minority of folks, thankfully. And so let's do what we can to be helpful, to be service oriented, right? And even under the integrity value, right? That means making sure that we are striving to collect the proper amount of tax, right? Not trying to be a revenue maximization agency. Growth, really talking about growth of how we provide value to Vermonters, not necessarily growth of revenue, right? But there's a lot of stuff going on in the world that's impacting tax administration, right? Remote work, when you're working across state lines, cryptocurrency, gig economy, right? All of these kind of things have interesting questions for taxes and tax administration. So we need to make sure that our staff are engaged, that they feel like they have professional development opportunities, that they feel like they're part of the future of the agency and stand ready to answer some of those important questions. And the last goal of value that we have, core values, community, right? In a lot of ways, that's the value that all of the other values feed into. It's also sort of interesting for my chair because maybe with the exception of the DMV, we have among the broadest constituencies in the Vermont state government, right? We interact with virtually every Vermonter, and they're going to come from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages, right? And we need to be able to stand ready to serve all of them. And we're also going to, do our jobs better and feel better internally when we're supporting each other in the workforce of tax and being comfortable asking for help and receiving help, right? And so really recognizing that taxes are such a central part of the community, right? Businesses that we visit and help are collecting sales tax on behalf of the state, right? If somebody calls desperately looking for their refund or their property tax credit or their renter credit, right? Those are the friends, family, neighbors that we have out in the community that need help. So just trying to keep that at the forefront of what we do has been really important. And I will say this has been a really rewarding exercise, and really it's not just lip service. We use these when we are making decisions, when we are setting strategic priorities, and it's been a very useful tool for us to be able to keep our eye on the ball and make sure that we're doing the right thing on behalf of Vermonters. So I'm happy to take any questions there, Madam Chair. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Andrew Stein.
We'll get to the money.
We'll get to the money.
Gee, well, now that we have sort of the culture and the mission and the mission, move on to cold cash.
All right. We try to keep it warm.
All right.
Thanks for having me. Andrew Stein, Chief Operating Officer, Department of Taxes. It's been a while since I've been in this room. I think it was 2 pro tems ago. I think I had a little more hair on my head then, but it's nice to see you all.
So that would have been Senator Ash. We reserved that seat for the pro tem.
That's right. It was Senator Ash. So we can go to the next slide, please.
Maybe Senator Ash is monitoring. We might get a tax.
All right. So I'm going to start with just an overview of our budget and current initiatives, then we'll drill down into more of the detail. So very high level, our budget is coming in at $30.8 million this year. And the main base operating components are in line with what was requested from finance and management, and it's certainly sufficient for us to run a highly functional department. And then we have some new initiatives on top of that, which we'll get to as we go along here. the bulk, the majority of our spending goes to salaries and benefits. IT is up a little bit this year as part of one of our key initiatives, which is taking our computer modernization fund and bringing that into the annual budget process. And we'll talk some more about that in a little bit. And then we break out other rent, building, services, postage and printing, internal services to round it out. I want to put a quick spotlight on some of our current initiatives. We're currently in the process of implementing Act 138 tax reforms. I would say we've done a lot of the implementation, and now is where the rubber meets the road. It's where taxpayers are going to be navigating all of these changes. Just a little bit of an overview of those changes. We have a new child tax credit that the legislature passed last year. We have an increase to the child and dependent care tax credit, which already existed. We have an increase to the earned income tax credit. We have a shift in the student loan interest deduction. We have changes, increases in retirement income exclusions. We have affordable housing tax credit for manufactured homes. And so that's a lot for us to implement. It was a very, very busy tax season. And we've been taking a very cautious approach at the beginning of this tax season to make sure that everything's working just fine. And so far, so good. Corporate income tax reforms, we're just shifting our attention to that. Although many of those aren't implemented until next year, we're implementing them now. We're in tax year 2023, and so it'll be 2024 when many of those corporate income tax returns come in. Cannabis taxes, there was a lot going on there. Whole new market, a lot of new taxpayers, a lot of new businesses, new business owners who have never, they've never run a business before, at least in the state of Vermont. And then we have these new
Or at
local.
least
Legally.
Yes. A registered business.
Yeah, okay. Can we run the business?
And and that's been an interesting time, as you can imagine. New local option tax counts as well. That's the local option tax is, as more and more towns come on, it creates additional complexities, and there's a lot of additional work on our end to help those towns understand how this operates and make sure that businesses understand how it operates. We're working regularly to provide communication on that front.
Andrew, do you know how many off the top of your head? Okay.
Yeah.
How many towns we have?
It depends. So we have meals and rooms, then Elmore is the one that only has rooms. And then we have
Do they even
sales.
have rooms?
Yeah, well, it's the state park.
Oh,
But there's also other emitters. And then
Sharon knows that.
I
Sharon,
think there's 20 sales tax and 23 meals.
23 towns.
23 meals and rooms and 20 sales tax. It's not yeah. Some of them are the same.
It does have implications, though, if there are so many proposals to raise some of those taxes, and people have got to remember what's the cumulative impact between what the state and then what that local might be, and that's going to vary tremendously. And I suppose some could have both sales tax and rooms and meals.
Yeah, and they do. Yeah, some do.
Our colleague in transportation wants to make it easier for towns to do that.
Well, he just wants everybody to get the local option tax from Amazon.
I like to do it.
You think so?
From Amazon,
Or for any,
And for any
Sale,
internet
internet.
any internet sales.
but you guys have to deal with that as well. You're collecting all that.
Yeah.
Who's that one?
Yeah.
Senator Chittenden from Chittenden.
Well, that's a good idea. That costs millions.
So,
Other initiatives, we want to maintain historically high efficiency this tax season last year, and we'll get into some of that information as part of our performance measures. We had the most efficient tax season we've ever had. We set the loftiest.
What does that mean, an efficient tax season?
It means that
you get your money faster in.
Yes, we processed returns in a shorter amount of time than ever before, and we refunded money and provided benefits back to Vermonters at large in a quicker amount of time. We use certain metrics, so timely filed returns that we provided a refund to, that we're requesting a refund by June 1. So that's like within 45 days. And then we look at within 30 days. And we meet each week, our leadership team with frontline staff, to go through these metrics to make sure that we're moving forward expeditiously with things.
Seems like speed, not efficiency.
Well, I guess I'm using the two as, I guess speed is a characteristic of efficiency in my mind. Yeah, how quickly we turn them around. We want to maintain integrity, but we'll get to that. We have a slide on that.
I'm sure you do. Okay. we're
So-
moving on.
We also want to complete the Vermont Property Information Exchange this year. That's a big deal. That is the statewide IT system for administering property taxes that all municipalities are relying on and that the department is helping to implement. That's a contract that we have. So that's a major project that's wrapping up on time and on budget.
Now, would that be part of your IT?
Yes, yeah, that is part of, we have a $5.2 million item, which we'll get to in a little bit, which that's
Yeah, I
for
see it
fiscal year
down the next
24.
page.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So another part of that is a new scanning project. And we're in the process, we're about to reissue an RFP for that project. That was a project that got off the ground years ago and was put on pause during the pandemic and our business requirements changed. And so we hadn't gone too far down the road with that project yet, and we had purchased a new scanner, and we decided that we were gonna update the business requirements and go back out to bid. Because the landscape had changed a bit, both internally and externally. We want to build on our recruitment success. We had extraordinary success this past year with recruitment. Our vacancy rate, I was talking to the COO of the Federation of Tax Administrators last week, and he asked what our vacancy rate was, and as of Friday, it was roughly 5%. And he told me he wasn't aware of any Department of Taxes or revenue in the country that was that low.
That's just normal. That's 5% is considered normal in terms of people leaving, retiring, coming in.
Around state government is,
Well, yeah, and historically it used to be.
I think right now.
Prior
Yeah.
to the pandemic and workforce.
Yeah, I think right now, the past, you'd have to talk with other departments and agencies, but I think we're doing pretty well. What he told me is that right now, this fellow with the FTA, as we call it, right now, commissioners around the country are viewing 10 to 12% as doing well. So just just contextualizing that. We want to continue process improvements on forms and VTax updates. VTax is our integrated IT system. It's been a huge success. It's a huge part of our success, and that's also where those IT dollars.
Are most taxes filed electronically now?
Yes. So 90+% of personal income taxes last year were filed electronically. We have, I wish I had that graph with me that shows the shift over the past 20 years.
Oh, it's gonna
20
be
years ago,
tremendous.
it was like 10% were filed electronically, and now it's over 90%. Across all tax types, do you know what it is off the top of your head right now, Sharon?
85 and 90 for all the tax types.
Yeah, some are more digital than others. In terms of their filing. And I also have on here to further operationalize our organizational values. But now we'll get into the cold hard money on the next page.
Yeah, I've been waiting.
Yeah. So increases, salaries, benefits, and retirement. Those were all in line with statewide requirements. Nothing super exciting there. Internal service fees were up a bit. That's completely out of our control.
Now, let me ask you, one of the things you made reference to it already was the 5.2 million for computer modernization.
Yep.
I mean, years ago, that got put up as a way of funding
Yeah.
your IT development, and it worked really well.
Yeah, it's been great.
And I know that the amount that was being allocated has been reduced, based on actual experience.
Yep.
So with your moving, you say the appropriation existed, it becomes part of the annual process. Are you going to keep set up what that that spending is, or is that just gonna get buried in other words, you're sort of in a system where you can self-fund those improvements, and so I'm just wondering how transparent that will be in
Yes.
your budgets.
It's going to be very transparent. So in the past, it hasn't been as transparent because it was and frankly, part of why we're putting this proposal forward, which if we want to jump to, maybe we should just go over this quickly. If we go to the next slide and then we can bounce back. So the budget initiative, the first one, the first key budget initiative is to codify the tax computer system modernization fund and adjust the appropriation cycle and funding mechanism. The first part of this, it lives in session law right now, and it spans BAAs, big bills, years over years over years in terms of the funding, in terms of what it can be used for, in terms of the appropriation, and it's been a multi-year appropriation. And so to go back and put it all together, it spans numerous bills in session law. And so what we want to do is put it in statute so that it's easy to reference for legislators and future administrators of the tax department. We're fortunate that Craig and I have both been at the department for, well, Craig even longer than 10 years, but me a bit over the past 10 years. And we've both worked a bit with this fund. So, and our existing general counsel has worked a bit with this fund. So we know where everything is. But 10 years from now, if we're not at the department, we want future administrators and legislators to be able to quickly reference what can this be used for, how is it funded, et cetera. And that is in the governor's recommended budget language, the codification language for this. We want to adjust the appropriation cycle to an annual cycle so that it is more transparent, so that we are having these conversations year over year. And the benefit of it being part of a multi-year cycle, we think has passed. When we were implementing this massive IT project, depending on how, first of all, we could save the state money by paying out a bit more upfront, because the way that contract worked is it was based on benefits. It was called a benefits-based contract. And what we did was baseline the amount of money generated from compliance exercises. And we tracked those compliance exercises and new compliance functionality in the new system against those baselines. And the difference, and we grew those baselines based on inflation. And the difference was what we call benefits and went into the fund. And that's how it was funded initially.
Yeah, it's setting that baseline was critical.
Yeah. But over time, the baseline, after like 10 years of doing that, wasn't quite as pertinent anymore. And so that baseline went away, I want to say 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So what we're proposing to do here is shift. So this will be a part of our budget every year. You'll see it here. It won't be a multi-year appropriation. And we're proposing shifting the funding mechanism to make it a smaller percentage of total revenue collected, because we place a very heavy emphasis on education campaigns and improving voluntary compliance.
So what is the relationship with your work here with digital services?
We work closely with them. Yeah, we work closely with them. So for example, I was talking with the AOA director of IT this morning. We have a standing meeting. I was telling him that this was a key element of what we were going to be talking about today. And we have an IT team. It used to be the tax IT team, and now it's the ABS IT team that serves tax. It's about a 12-person team of developers. And then we also have, and they work on they work on our main VTax system as well as some other systems. And then we also have vendors that we work with, developers, depending on what the system is. But our main system is VTax, and that vendor is Fast Enterprises. And we also work with the Agency of Digital Services. For example, last night I was working with the project manager from the Agency of Digital Services on the scanning RFP. So we're a very modern department. And with regard to the Agency of Digital Services, I think our relationship is a little bit different than some other departments that are, haven't modernized as much over the past 15 years.
But you've been able to have a funding source under this construct that
It's,
other, and you have it because you're a revenue generating entity compared to some other parts of state government, which you're helping to fund.
yeah, and I think it's pretty similar to an internal service fund. A lot of departments and agencies have internal service funds. For example, our agency of administration has internal service funds. Our finance and management has internal service funds for their services that we pay into. We provide a service to all of state government. We've talked about this and talked about it with the Commissioner of Finance and Management. We think an internal service fund structure would be a lot clunkier than this. This is a lot more streamlined. And also, you know, the Department of Financial Regulation, I know, has a funding stream. Department of Liquor and Lottery also has a revenue structure. A&R through their fees has some revenues. So I think you meet departments and agencies where they are. If something's working, you leverage that. And in our case, this was created in 2007. It's been an extraordinary success. Removing it would equate to like a 20% budget cut for us. It would be pretty catastrophic, frankly. So,
I didn't mean to suggest that I was thinking of
oh,
that.
I'm not suggesting, I wouldn't suggest that.
I'm just saying, when you're generating revenues, it helps to put this kind of construct together.
Yeah,
That's all.
yeah.
And it's worked. I mean, obviously, you haven't hit the press with a failed system. And obviously, the work you do and the work, your relationship you have with our joint fiscal office has been really critical. So that's, I think a lot of progress has been made since 2006.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for the Joint Fiscal Office's role in this. I know that my understanding is this fund was created in part with Steve Klein's input, and he's a big proponent of this. So
I think you're gonna have a lot more slides here than we're gonna get.
yeah. So I'll keep it high level. Do you want me to hit on the other key budget
Yeah, why
initiatives?
don't you?
Because the rest is pretty boilerplate for us.
I thought you were gonna say boring.
Well, the rest is pretty boring.
Boilerplate.
So we have the newly created, it's really, we're calling it internally the Commercial Appropriation Litigation Assistance Program.
And you have a report on that too as well. And I think that came with what, 800,000?
Yes, yes.
That was another report that I read.
Yeah,
But we certainly have some examples of that, a high appraisal for hydro dams,
yes, it's building on that program. That I know you've
which got
been.
created right
I
here.
know, yeah.
Oh,
That's based on my understanding.
Well, yes, I can tell you, because it came out of the fact that the towns, and who would have the expertise, local listers to do that. So it hadn't been reappraised for years back then. So I know that we've come up against that. And so are you asking for 800,000?
Yeah, that's what we're asking for. 300,000 would go to funding 2 positions, a program manager and a staff attorney, and then $500,000 would be used for contracts for
So what would you
commercial.
use your staff attorney for, rather than because the AAG's office?
Oh, yeah, it is part of the DH's office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When you said staff attorney, it brings that
Yes, yeah,
issue around.
yeah,
I
so.
have my own, I can't work through the.
So as part of the appeals process, it's conceivable that this position would litigate, and anytime there's litigation, we like that. I mean, all of our legal team, except for 2 policy analysts, are part of the Attorney General's office. Our general counsel is part of the Attorney General's office. So I know that wasn't the case for a brief period of time with the department under Commissioner Peterson, I think for a year or 2, but that shifted back with this administration. And Will Baker's our general counsel. They do a phenomenal job.
Well, on the appeal, certainly when you had the appraisals done for all the hydro dams on the Connecticut River, every single one of them was appealed. And yet, in that case, the appraisals were pretty solid and the court upheld them. And then we had the little one over in Franklin County where it was overturned, yeah, and So it's, and that was unfortunate, the town had fees, and then they had to repay the education fund, except we got language, I guess, to take care of it, but they are really complicated.
Yeah.
So what other applications of types of properties do you think would come under this litigation assistance or appraisal?
So large complex commercial properties, whether it's
Ski
a,
resorts?
yeah, resorts of any kind, I think that are unique and that a municipality struggles to appraise. There's various extraction operations around the state, not a ton, but there are some, and I know some of those municipalities have struggled to find.
You mean like Omnia?
Yeah, and like, I'm not as familiar with those types of properties,
Or
but
granite quarries?
exactly, that's a perfect example. There's also specialized manufacturing plants, things of that nature, other maybe large retail type establishments that are in a town that they just don't. I mean, our appraisal system, it's a hot issue right now, and it's in many places in the state staffed by, or in some places it's not staffed very well because they're struggling to find folks, but it's tough to find that level of
So
professionals.
the governor's proposed budget
Has taken.
does like the recommendations of that report.
Yes, yep. Yeah, and it funds the program that the legislature passed last year. So
And then modernize,
modernize the current use program, yeah. 43% of Vermont's land area is enrolled in current use, isn't that something?
Yeah.
And it is a program that is largely administered via paper and very manual processes.
I know, I get the forms every year,
Yeah. And so what this ultimately does,
and I'm not enrolled, I just want, if I'm on record, I'm not enrolled in current use, I want people to know.
Why do you get the point?
Because I'm trustee for the farm property, which was enrolled for a long time.
Yeah,
It's very few farms could afford to operate in the state of Vermont,
Sure.
if their land was appraised at highest and best use.
Yeah, it's kept a lot of farms in operation and farmland in operation to a farmer that rents.
Yeah, and that's why people like to come to Vermont, is our open and working landscape. So it's actually, people don't connect it, but it's really critical to travel and tourism, quality of life, and a host of other aspects. So it's a way of recognizing the importance and the affordability for particularly forestry and farms. But that's, yes, go ahead.
I would just say that, but you sign up and if you do certain things, you're eligible for the appraisal. I would say your term in here of savings, in the statute, it says nothing about savings anywhere. It talks about eligibility for to be in the program to do exactly what everybody else is talking about.
Where's the savings in the number 3? Oh, about savings. I'm on the text.
So from my point of view, I take exception to the savings.
how would you phrase that?
The individual is eligible for, after signing up and after saying they won't develop and then go into a contract. What they do is they say they're going to do a certain thing and they are afforded an appraisal. And once you are afforded an appraisal.
Amount of savings to landowners?
He's looking at the current use performance table.
Yes, that's the one.
Do you think benefits is a better term? Amount of benefits to landowners?
I think
Still not.
it's still not exactly what I'm saying. They're eligible in statute for an appraisal. And once you get that appraisal, that's the standard by which you're taxed. And you're taxed at the same rate, as everyone else. Your appraisal is different.
Mhm.
And your appraisal is based upon that you've agreed to keep the land open, and this is what it's going to be used for. If it was a savings, then you would give them a lower rate.
We call that a differential.
I
Yeah,
would-
something.
It could be called a differential, but I don't see it as a savings.
It is all a differential because the town gets a full tax money. So,
Oh, well, I guess what you're talking about is what you would pay if you were not enrolled in current use.
Yes.
Versus what you are paying.
Yeah.
If you're enrolled, and the difference of, let's see, the difference is the 66. Well, maybe there's a better way of describing it.
But people who are not enrolled will still see it as the differential that allows for savings.
And it is very significant, what it's about 90%. It's quite,
It's big.
it's very big.
Where the land's located.
Yeah, a lot depends on the land. But you know, if you have a spectacular view of the presidential range in the White Mountains,
Yeah,
it's quite,
that's
it
worth a
it
lot
is
of
worth a
money.
lot.
yeah.
The statute calls for meeting criteria.
Mhm.
And if you met criteria, you get an appraisal.
The question though, I think people are gonna wanna say is what is the overall benefit to the property owners enrolled in current use? And that is the 66.6, right?
The benefit is for the people in the state for the views that you create.
It's on the person who's enrolled, because if they weren't enrolled, it's higher.
Well, they'd be
Well,
sold for houses.
We'll noodle on this. I appreciate the feedback. It's helpful.
All right, yes, Senator Starr.
Yeah,
You're probably responsible for this anyway, you know? Because you've been
It
around so
probably
long.
is.
yeah, because it was all set up for forest lane. And we left the forest lane alone.
But then
And
added the
It was like
agricultural.
2 years after the forest lane got put in by Henry Karst over in Sheldon. Then my buddies up north, my farmer friend, you wanna start getting us into that or you're gonna be out of Montpelier. No, it went well. But anyway, my question is, do elderly people, or do people have to sign like a homestead exemption if they're getting a property tax rebate?
Yes, a property tax rebate.
Oh,
Every-
property tax credit, like for your income,
Yeah,
you have to
We all do
submit a
have to
homestead
have a
declaration.
homestead declaration regardless of income.
yeah, but you do that
No,
when
you
you
don't have.
do your tax.
Yes, you don't have.
Then you'd get a renter's rebate.
You do that when you do your tax papers.
You're required to do that declaration.
Well, what, two elderly people, I don't know if they don't file income
Oh,
tax
maybe that's
or
it.
what the deal is, but they didn't get those declarations signed and sent
Oh,
in.
so now their property tax is based on, they're not getting the income
Is
sensitivity.
there some way to fix that at a
let's-
certain age, or if you
Um,
don't file, or?
It's a complicated answer. Why don't we connect offline if you want to send me an email and, because I don't want to talk about an individual issue in committee. but-
And I'm also looking at the clock, and so I think we've gone through the budget part. And the reason I'm looking at the clock is this room at 4:30 becomes a different meeting
Right.
site for
That's right, we
for
got-
another meeting, so,
Yep, four of it are.
yeah, I know, 4 of us don't even have to get out of our seats, but,
But we might.
but Bobby, if you want to talk to the commissioner then maybe about
Right.
offline.
Right now, or some other?
Well, you've got a meeting in about 3 minutes.
Yeah. When you're up here, I'm either here or.
You've already done enough damage to your image today.
And if you wanna,
Oh, sucker.
I'm gonna leave this here for you too. in case you
Brenda
have trouble getting
Ferrari
it
is
right.
looking as well.
Nice seeing you.
Yeah.
How many people are monitoring you, Commissioner? Oh,
Brenda's there. Hey, Brenda. Thank you so much.
Apparently.
Really appreciate it.
I don't know.
If you have any
Thank you.
additional questions.
So
please let
I
us know.